Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Now today, as you can see, we've got a bit of a scenery change. I'm not in my regular favorite park location to shoot. That's because we're here in Westfield, Chatswood at our Canon specialty store. So that's it just behind me here. This is a new store, one of our newer stores, and they specialize specifically in Canon gear. As opposed to our other stores that sell all the major brands, here we specialize in Canon. So all the staff are extremely knowledgeable about Canon gear. If you live or work in the North Sydney area and you shoot Canon, please do come on by and check us out. We're on the 4th level of Westfield, Chatswood. But it's fitting that we're here today because we're going to be talking about a brand new Canon release. They just announced it today. That's the 77D. This was actually one of two announcements that Canon made today. The other one was about the M6, which is going to be their newest mirrorless camera. You can check out my video on that one here. So the 77D is a new APS-C size DSLR that's just been announced. It'll be out in late March, early April, and it's really kind of like a little brother to the 80D, which in itself was only released about 9 or 10 months ago. And we'll see that the 77D has a lot of similar features with the 80D. It is going to come in at a more affordable price point. Canon hasn't announced exactly what that will be yet, but we do know it's going to be cheaper than the 80D. It has a lot of features from the 80D, with some notable exceptions, like it does not have weather sealing, which the 80D does have. And it does have a couple new features. One notable new feature really is a brand new user interface. This is the first camera of Canon that has this new interface. I'm sure we'll see it on a lot of future Canon cameras, but it's one of the strongest points about this camera. It's a really slick UI. But rather than talk about it, let's take a look at the camera first. So the 77D has a very familiar body design and style and feel from other Canon cameras in this range that we're used to seeing. It's got a good, solid mid-range build quality. It's not quite as high as your full-frame 5Ds or so on, but it's noticeably better than some of your entry-level DSLRs. It's a good, solid build. We do have this nice LCD screen on the top right of the camera. That means if we've got the camera below eye level, we can quickly glance down and check our settings. That's going to be really useful if you want to quickly change settings. And it's something that is not seen on a lot of cameras. Usually you have to be in the slightly the higher end to get a screen like that. And even then, it's not always included. So it's nice to have on this camera. We do have a fully articulating LCD touchscreen here. That's really good for shooting video or anytime that you're shooting in weird angles or strange positioning. Good to have that flip out screen. It does have back button focusing on the camera. We've got this little sensor above the viewfinder here, so when you're using the viewfinder, that will automatically turn off the LCD screen, save you a little bit of battery power, so that's nice. I already mentioned the camera is not weather sealed like the 80D is. Another main point of physical difference between the 80D is that the shutter is not rated for as many actuations as the 80D is. Now let's touch on that user interface that I mentioned, and like I said, this is one of the best features on this camera. It's a really clean new user interface. Again, the first Canon camera to display it. And as we can see here, first of all, it's a lot brighter. It has a white background with black text as opposed to the more traditional Canon's black background with white text. It pops out a lot more. It's really well set up, I found, for touch control. Normally, I don't really use touch control on cameras that much because I find the menus are still kind of geared towards button control. But I found myself automatically just kind of tending towards using touch controls here. It's really a natural fit for this. It really brings it kind of into the modern age. It feels more like you're using a smartphone with all of our swipes and taps and so on that we're used to these days. So that's nice to see in a camera. It's also really good for teaching someone how to use some of the semi-manual modes like aperture priority and shutter priority. When we go to these modes here, we get this nice spectrum that comes up here, and on either side of the spectrum we've got little images that show us how our image will be affected by using different settings. For example, on the one side we've got wide aperture setting that shows us that we're going to have a blurry background. On small aperture settings, we're going to have everything in focus. We've got these dialog boxes that pop up as we enter different aperture ranges with extra little hints giving us some guidance there. Similarly, if you flip it over to shutter speed, we've got on the one side blurred motion for long shutter speeds and then sharp motion on the other side for fast shutter speeds. Just a really good, it's simple, but it's a very good visual reminder, especially if you're just trying to learn what these settings are. But even if you're used to all these settings, you don't need those hints. It's just a very clean system, easy to use, easy to navigate. And if you disagree with me on all of these points and you really just like the old Canon UI, that's fine. You can still use that. You can disable this new UI and still use what you're used to in other Canon cameras as well. So now let's touch on some of the under the hood features of the 77D. So it does have a 24.2 megapixel APS-C size sensor. So it's a fairly high resolution sensor. You're going to be able to blow these photos up to a good size or crop in quite a bit on them. It also has a new Digic 7 processor in it. The Digic 7 processor has been in some of Canon's very recent releases, like the M5 that just came out a couple months ago. The 80D had the Digic 6 processor, so the 77D does have a newer processor than the 80D did. Now looking at autofocus, this is one definite strong point on the 77D because it inherits the 45-point dual pixel autofocus system from the 80D. Now, when the 80D came out 9 or 10 months ago, that was the first time that we'd seen this autofocus system. It's now made its way into the M5 as well as the new M6, which was also announced today, and now the 77D as well. It's still a fairly new system. It's very, very strong. It's got a lot of autofocus points, 45 points across the frame. They're all cross-type autofocus points, so they're fast and responsive. This system in particular is very strong at tracking shots, as well as autofocus for video or in live view. So some good strengths there. In addition, the camera can shoot at up to 6 frames per second in burst mode, which means that you can capture some good sports action, or even if you got some kids running around who just won't sit still. Couple that with the fast autofocus and that high burst shooting speed, you can definitely get some good movement shots with the 77D. In terms of video functionality, the 77D can shoot full HD 1080p footage at up to 60 frames per second. So you can use that to get slow motion footage at full HD, which is nice. A couple other grab bag features in there. It does have built-in time lapse, so you can shoot a time lapse sequence and the camera will put it together into a video file for you in camera. It also has Wi-Fi, NFC, and Bluetooth low energy. These are all systems that you'll use to connect to your smartphone. Bluetooth low energy is a bit new. The 80D did not have that. It's just a bit of a more convenient way to connect to your phone. It's a little bit easier to set up and faster to use than Wi-Fi. But it still does have Wi-Fi and NFC if you prefer to connect it that way. Now finally, the 77D will be able to be bought as a kit with an 18 to 55mm lens. The 18 to 55mm lens on here is actually a new version of this popular kit lens. So it is an image stabilized STM lens. STM refers to the focusing motor on the front. So that's similar to the previous 18 to 55mm kit lenses. The main difference here is that this one is just a little bit smaller. It's about the same diameter, but it's not quite as long. So a little bit more of a compact lens, which is nice to have. One other minor difference is that the aperture range on this new lens is f4 to 5.6, as opposed to on the previous model, it was f3.5 to 5.6. So this new one is going to be a little bit darker when you're fully zoomed out at 18mm. That's the trade-off for getting the slightly smaller lens design. So as we can see here, the 77D really does share a lot of features with the 80D, its bigger brother. Essentially, you're trading off that lack of a weather sealing on the 77D in exchange for a more affordable price point, and you gain that brand new user interface system. Now, realistically speaking, the 77D is not going to revolutionize photography. A lot of its features and specs are pulled from other cameras in Canon's lineup, but it is a very solid entry. So anyone who's maybe a hobbyist or an enthusiast who wants a camera that frankly punches above its weight in terms of specs is going to like the 77D, as well as anyone who really wants to take advantage of that interface. Now that could be someone who just wants a nice, clean, modern feeling interface on a camera, finally, right? Or someone who wants to leverage that, the teaching aspects of that interface into understanding some of the semi-manual modes like aperture and shutter priority a little bit better. It's, again, really strong at explaining that in a clear visual way. Now, as I mentioned, the camera is going to be coming out in late March, early April. If you'd like to place a pre-order or chat to someone about it, come on down to one of our stores, like, for example, the Chatswood store here in Chatswood, North Sydney. We also have other stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, the Melbourne and Brisbane CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia, just outside of Perth. You can, of course, also pre-order the 77D on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Thanks, guys. Take care.